I think it's important to remember that you don't have to have this big, grand plan to start a business.
Chris and Chris Talk Business.
Hello, welcome to the Chris and Chris Show. I'm Chris.
And I'm Chris.
Wow, two guys with the same name on the same show. How often do you see that happen? Yeah. Anyway, we're glad to have you with us for this episode of the show, and we got a friend of mine that's come on to the show, Richard Giles, and we'll let you, Richard, introduce yourself for us, and then we'll just kind of dive into stuff.
Hi, well, my name is Richard Giles, and I have known Chris now for about 5 years. Good relationship there in our church.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, this Chris.
Yeah,
Wiley Chris.
Yeah, that one. And I have I've done a number of different things in my life. It seems like I've gone into the entrepreneurial route several times and also been an employee. So I've enjoyed both.
Yeah. Well, you know, the fun thing is, you mentioned, we've known each other for about 5 years. I didn't really learn about your background either in aviation or in business until we had known each other a little while.
Right.
So you don't like wear it on your sleeve. I kind of had to dig it out of you. But you've had some fun adventures. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you got into aviation. Maybe that's a good place to start, because I think a lot of the stuff you've done has been wrapped up with that, right?
Yes, aviation has been my primary career, and some of the things that I've done that are not aviation related kind of grew out of contacts or other kind of necessities in the aviation part of my career. I can't ever remember a time that I wasn't fascinated by airplanes. I can remember as a little kid, I would run outside when airplanes would fly over, and built models when I was even preschool. So fascination with airplanes, fascination with anything mechanical, really. Built all sorts of little gadgets. My father was a very handy guy, and he would build things for us like little paddle wheels that would drive toys and things like that. So just an insatiable curiosity about how things work. I took apart the stories my folks would tell. I would take apart almost anything, and sometimes I couldn't get them back together. But I think that was more often than not. When I turned 14, in the state of Kentucky, I was able to get a work permit, which you had to have in order to work, and got a job. I won't even tell you what I was making an hour. It's pretty cheap back in those days. But my folks encouraged me to explore aviation a little bit. My dad used to take us to the airport, and we'd sit and watch airplanes. So I started taking some flying lessons.
At 14?
It started at 14 because I wanted to
Nice.
solo on my 16th birthday, which is the youngest that you can solo. And of course, it exceeded my earning capacity, my job. So I started trading, washing airplanes and helping the mechanics and things like that in exchange for flying lessons. So that's kind of how I got started. The result of that was that by the time I was in high school, this was pre-high school. By the time I was in high school, I already had my pilot's license.
Wow.
And then in college, I was able to work as a flight instructor and also as a charter pilot. So just kind of went that route. I worked my full-time job while I was in college was working as a machinist. And there I made a connection with the company pilot. And he would bring in, he was also a mechanic, and so he would bring in little projects into the machine shop. And since they knew of my aviation interests, those things would get sent over to me.
Indeed.
So I'd fix his parts or make him a part or something like that. That resulted in him inviting me to come out to the airport and start doing some co-pilot work with him. And when I finished college, that company offered me I had a business degree, but they offered me two paths. One path was in their aviation department, and the other was in their their executive grooming track. I took the airplane job.
Sure. Why not? Sounds definitely more fun. You don't want to, nobody wants to mean it. I mean, I already can tell you and I are probably cut from some similar cloth, taking apart things at a young age, and especially not putting them back together. And so, yeah, why would you want to be an executive when you could have fun flying airplanes?
Exactly.
Going back, I'm assuming you're flying. I know a little bit about airplanes. I'm probably not an expert like you, but I'm guessing you're flying like Cessna 150s, 162, 172s, stuff like that, or am I? What kind of planes were you flying?
I learned to fly in a Cessna 150. Did my later training in 172s, 182s to get the instrument rating and all, and then Piper Aztec to get a multi-engine rating, and then was fortunate enough to be flying co-pilot on this company airplane, which was a King Air, and so I got my ATP and also my airframe power plant mechanics license working with them at that company.
You know, The thing I love about this this kind of background, Richard, is it's so intuitive and natural. I mean, it wasn't like you had it all planned out. It was just you kind of pursued each opportunity as it came along. You were excited about airplanes. You decided, I want to work at an airport. You just did whatever was required to be there. And, you had a goal. You wanted to get your pilot's license by the time you were 16. That's pretty impressive. Particularly by today's standards, where it doesn't seem like anybody can figure out what they want to do with regard to anything until they're like 40.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
no, they want to live in their parents' basement and play video games until they're 40, right?
Yeah, they want to play video games where they are a pilot and they're pretending to fly a plane.
There you go. Although I'll be honest with you, I'm almost 75 years old now, and I still haven't figured out what I want to do when I grow up.
Awesome. I love that answer.
Right.
So you're flying you're co-pilot in this airplane, you're fixing stuff in this machine shop. At what point did you start your entrepreneurial career? Like what was the first company that you started?
Well, the first company that I started was just doing part-time help for different people. Anything from raking leaves to mowing lawns. I can't ever remember when I didn't have some sort of a side gig going on. And I think back on it, and I didn't even think of that as entrepreneurial. But as I've gotten older, I realized that really was the root of it. And I think one of the things that's, as I reflect back on my life, is in addition to being curious, I'm also always had a little bit of a hard time sitting still. And that didn't work real well when I was in grade school, but it did make me always kind of active and looking for something to do. And so I think that's the kind of the root of my entrepreneurship. My first real gig was I had a real interest in aerobatics, air shows, and also in competition aerobatics. So I built an airplane. Well, it started while I was in college, but it went through my marriage. We had an airplane in our living room, and then wings in the bedroom.
This sounds actually accurate. I can totally see this actually.
Yeah. And this was a biplane, airplane that was used at that time, for air show work and also for competition, and part of the seed for that was sown in that very first bunch of flying lessons, because one of the guys that flew out of that same airport and had his airplane in that hangar was a young man, a couple of years older than I am, by the name of Gene Soucy. And anybody who knows air shows, he is he's a Hall of Famer in the air show business. Well, I got to play around with his airplane. I got to work on it and got to clean it and got very well acquainted with him. Well,
let's stop here a second, because you have said about half a dozen things that are worth exploring a little bit.
Sure.
Going all the way back to not being able to sit in school. So this is one of the things that I've observed with academic types who did sit well in school. They get to adulthood and they discover that they're not at the front of the class anymore. That they've been passed up by these C and D students who couldn't sit still, but who actually got outside of the building and went out and learned things about life and how to do things for themselves and so forth. And they're full of resentment because of this. A lot of the hatred that you see on the part of the new left. By the way, these are people who spent almost their entire lives in the academy in some way or other. Just never left. We called them Klingons. They just were not able to leave school. They really are angry that people like you and Elon Musk and whoever didn't need the credentials to go out and do stuff, and they resent it deeply. But the other thing that's fun to think about is just how you just sort of just kind of went from thing to thing. The fact that you were working on a plane in your house means that you had to have a special kind of wife who can deal with this, and she comes home and there's just parts everywhere. And those are just a couple of things that I wanted to kind of note.
Yeah. No, I think you touched on it, Wiley, is I face this a little bit, and it's even with close friends and family sometimes where, when you go the academic route, you're waiting for people to acknowledge that and then present you opportunities. Right. And the ADD folks like myself and Richard and you and some other folks, we're just out actively participating. Right. We're participating in the experience. And so when opportunities come up, we're the first ones in line, and it's usually the opportunities are given by people that they just want the job done.
Right.
It's not a competence question. Now, you have to be somewhat competent, but we're the ones actively engaging, and so we do get those opportunities because we're participating. And then you do, I totally agree with the resentment part. The people that feel like they're deserving of those opportunities because they have the accolades, and I kind of get it, but at the same time, it's like, they weren't participating. I guess they were participating differently. They're
coloring in between the lines, and doing what they were told, and brown nosing and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I cut you off.
I like brown nosing. Brown nosing. I have to brown nose still. I mean, there's nothing wrong with brown nosing. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Richard, go on. Keep telling us your story. I'm sorry to jump in like that.
No, that's fine. It's just it all fits together, and with kind of the question you started off with the airplane business that I had later in my life, and it all started right where I am with having an airplane in my garage, and not in the garage. We had them in the garage too later, but in the bedroom and in the living room, the aerobatic community is it's an esoteric sport. It's but those that are in it are just avid. And it so happened that this guy who I can't really call him a friend, but we were very good acquaintances. Gene Susi was the national aerobatic champion, and then he was on the U.S. aerobatic team. And so through that connection, even though my full-time job was now still flying for this company, flying a King Air, I would go and I would help out with the U.S. aerobatic team, and they invited me to be their mechanic in 1978, and I did that again a couple of years later. So I got to play with some really cool airplanes and do modifications and talk to them about things that they wanted to improve their performance. And so that kind of segued over what we'll talk about here in a minute, this idea of an airplane. But I want to point out, we're talking in the mid-'70s now. We're talking about a long time ago for a lot of people. But the airplane that was known as the Giles G200, the two-place was the 202. I laid down the initial three view drawings in 1976.
So this is a plane that you invented or you designed. Yes. So that's the name. Giles is not a coincidence.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this plane. So you found yourself in this environment with a lot of really highly motivated, gifted people who were into aerial acrobatics. And
yes,
so I think I remember seeing a photo of you in the maybe it's this plane that you invented or created, and you're flying, and you're pretty close to the ground, and you have a smile on your face. I remember. We got to put that. A lot of fun. Yeah, we got to post that somewhere when we put this show up. Yeah.
I'll see if I can find it and send it to you.
I mean, I want to know now until I see when this gets edited, there'll be a picture. How close are you talking, Wiley, when you saw this? Or I guess Richard could answer because he was the one in the plane, but how close to the ground are you?
Well, at that time, I had an FAA waiver to ground level, so I could literally fly as low as I wanted to. So it's a matter of prudence at that point.
You'd had to look at, if I remember it correctly, it had the look that you had you had come down and you were now like ascending again. You was sort of like,
I think so. Yeah, probably.
So you're building this plane. Did we already say that was composite? Or tell me about the plane. Like what made the plane special, especially in the 70s? That was.
Yeah. So I laid it down on paper in '76. And at that time, I was having a lot of fun and I was getting a lot of experience, but I didn't have a lot of money, and so I had already built an airplane, so I thought, okay, I'm just going to build this thing, and that was the initial idea. It was a completely clean sheet of paper airplane. There was nothing on it that was derived from any other aircraft. I was feeling a little bold and a little scared at the same time. But Chris Wiley knows this about me. I read constantly. That's one of my weaknesses is that if I don't know something, I just go get a book and read it. And so I had read a lot about aerodynamics and what makes airplanes fly, and so I felt pretty good about the viability of the aircraft. But as I started building it, I realized that the materials that were available to us in the 70s were not going to be able to give me the advantage that I felt I needed in order for this airplane to stand out and be, superior to anything else that was out there. And so why do it if I'm just going to build something else that's just like everybody else's?
Sure. And those materials are, is it just steel? Is it aluminum?
Steel tube, chrome moly steel tubing. Okay. Same way, hot rod cars were built in that era. Even Indianapolis cars were all, steel tubing, and in aviation, the wings would have been, wood, maybe some aluminum in the wings, but primarily we call them steel tube, wooden rag, covered with cloth, and that's the way my biplane was.
Good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. And so I realized, but at the same time, I learned that there was this new material that NASA was using called carbon fiber. And this stuff was like the wonder material. And so I thought, well, I'd really like to build this thing out of carbon fiber. So there was another gentleman who was on the aerobatic team that I got to know pretty well, a guy by the name of Leo Laudenschlager. And Leo had an airplane that was similar in construction. It was a steel tube and wood wing, and he wanted to go lighter. And so he had some connections and was able to have a wing built out of carbon fiber, completely out of carbon fiber, at I believe the university, it was either, I'm not sure where it was, but anyway, university engineering department took on this project and they built this wing for him. And I was just in love with this whole thing. It was a white paper that was developed from the project. And I thought, okay, this is the way we got to go. And then until I got down to kind of the end of the white paper, and it says to duplicate this effort, it would cost probably somewhere between $4 and $5 million. Well, there goes my carbon fiber airplane. So the airplane just kind of went on the side. I would tell people about it, but once in a while, but most people thought it was just a pipe dream, which it was at that time, to be honest. And so I just kind of went on with my life. I was working for this company. They were a very good company to work for. They were growing. Their flight department was growing. And so I had a two-place pit special that I flew air shows in, continued my involvement with the aerobatic team, and was just kind of marking time, growing a family,
this
all
is
those things that you do, living life.
Yeah, this is a great thing to think. So think about it. So this is still like a dream. This is still in the back of your mind. You kind of come up, you hit a wall. It was the money wall. But you didn't let it go. It was something that still was percolating. I imagine you were going back and tinkering on the idea every once in a while. And just kind of waiting for your moment. There are a couple of things about this. One is, the first thing to note is you were bold. So I think one of the things that characterizes a certain kind of young man, and it's mostly young men, is a kind of a tolerance for risk that some people think is like a fault. I actually think it's one of the greatest gifts that God has given to any community, and that is young men who are willing to take risks and do things that other people think are dumb or maybe are scary or dangerous or don't make sense. But there's enough kind of naive confidence that this is going to work out. And I'm just going to do it. And that's great. And then the other thing is, the ability to just kind of nurse it along, not be defeated by hitting that wall, the money wall, and just say, maybe things will change. Yeah.
Well, you hit on the bold comment. I really it resonates really well with me. And I mean, to push back a little bit, the white paper that you read, Richard, somebody claimed to reproduce this would cost $4 to $5 million, and who are they? And I think that's where the bold desire or initiative that comes into to men, they seek to do it regardless of what others may say, whether it's the price too high or it can't be done or it has to be done a certain way. Not to toot my horn, but, we started a telecom company with, I think it was like $2,500, and how do you do that? It costs billions of dollars, and so, I think that's where the creative right. problem solving and the innovations come in, and sometimes it's a timing thing. So,
exactly. That's what I was going to mention, Chris, is it's a timing issue because at that particular time, even if I had wanted to do it and had tried to find some workaround to the cost issue, carbon fiber was a classified material. It was restricted material. NASA were the only ones that really had any access to it. The technology was not really developed and suitable for what I wanted to do. It's just that I was enamored with the material because of its properties. So I think from a timing standpoint, to allow that. The materials and then the technology to mature a few years, and then we came back to it. So to spoil the ending, the airplanes were all carbon fiber, and they were the first all carbon fiber airplanes that were ever built in the world.
Was it just the wings, or was the fuselage? Was everything? Whole thing. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So I'm imagining that this kind of put your name on the map for a lot of people.
Well, it did, and there's there's a lot of ramifications, and we've had some conversations about that, and there's there's some upside and there's some downside. One of the things that I would always tell people, particularly young men, is don't believe your own press releases.
Particularly if you write them.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
Don't believe your own press releases. And the second thing is that when you start looking in newspapers and magazines and you're looking for your own name, it's time to do something different.
Yeah. No, that's a very interesting thought. I think a lot of guys would like to be at that place, but what you're helping us to see is that when you do arrive at that place, there are some dangers.
Yes, and yeah.
So let's explore the kind of the upside of this. Just the fact that you're at another level now, and now you've invented a plane, but you've not just invented a plane. You did something more. You developed a company around the plane, right?
Yes, and there's a like down south we'd say there's a little bit between the cusp and the lip here. And that is how we went from the late 70s, early 80s to when I actually built the airplane in '94. And there was more than just the maturing of the technology. There also was a lot of things that happened in my life. And just to touch on them very, very quickly and briefly, there was I had to make a major change in my life due to the death of my wife, and was a single father with a 10-year-old daughter who was severely injured, and so I made a move from where I was living out to Portland, Oregon, and got involved with an aviation company out there that didn't require me to travel all the time. So, in God and His providence, provided that time for me to make some other contacts. The company that I went to work for was in financial trouble, and I was able to stabilize that business, turn it around, and make it profitable. And in doing so, kind of caught the eye of the executives at U.S. National Bank. And so they asked me to join them. This was kind of I would call this, Chris, my first real entrepreneurial venture was working. We started off with another firm and then on my own, doing what we call now turnaround consulting or being a corporate gunslinger for the special assets department of the bank. And I would get referred into businesses through U.S. Bank. And as a result of that, I wound up financially able in the as we came up to the 90s to be able to look at this airplane again. And a business that I owned at the time, there was another aerospace company that was based up in Everett, Washington, had some real ties with Boeing. They wanted the business more than I did. And so I sold it to them and decided, okay, I'm gonna go build my airplane now. So there was the not only the maturation of the technology, but there was also an ability financially on my part to be able to do it.
So a maturation of the entrepreneur.
Yes, there you go. Yeah. I would say that would be it. So in the early 90s, I had just sold this business. I was still on a consulting contract with them for a year, for a 12-month consulting contract with not a lot to do. And so I developed all the drawings for the airplane, a complete complement of drawings. And the other thing that happened, let's talk about the maturation of the technology, because that's really interesting. After we landed men on the moon and kind of wound down the Apollo project, there was a huge layoff and downscale at NASA and also in the aerospace industry, particularly in Southern California. And there were guys who were real rocket scientists who were out of a job.
Wow.
And so many of those men were really interested in the same kinds of aviation that I was involved in, the aerobatics or high performance sport planes and things like that. And so there were these guys with all kinds of NASA knowledge and experience. And then the other side of it was that the manufacturers all of a sudden had lots of carbon fiber material that they didn't have resources or didn't have an outlet for. So there's a lot of resources, but so the price of carbon fiber just felt like a rock. So there were some guys down in the Southern California area, all of them out of the aerospace industry, and I got acquainted with them, and they helped me transition my design from this conventional materials to utilizing carbon fiber. And there was a company in Oxnard, California, called High Tech Composites, and they had some experience. Their engineers were all ex NASA and you know, those kind of guys, and so they said, "Hey, let's just build this thing. We'll help you." So, and in the early '90s, we started actual construction of all of the tooling that we had to build first. We had to completely build the tooling, and then we all of the carbon fiber was high temperature, essentially autoclave cured material. And I would drive down to California and pick up these parts in my pickup truck and bring them back to Portland and start putting it together. So that's kind of how all that came together. And so in '94, I had the prototype. The first one was built, and as I mentioned earlier, this was a completely clean sheet of paper airplane. And so I was not about to let anybody else fly it. I was definitely going to fly it myself. And so out at the Troutdale Airport, Portland, on a April morning, I went out before. All my friends were just, you know, they all wanted to watch the first flight. No, I'm not going to let anybody watch the first flight. I don't know what this is going to do. So I told everybody else, okay, we're going to try to meet out there around 9 o'clock in the morning, and and then I was out at 6 that morning. I'm sorry for the little white lie there, but I did not want an audience. I definitely didn't want an audience.
I've heard that similar story. I think it was Burt Rutan would always like have his test flight on a certain day, and the night before he would take the plane out and fly it around to test it before the official test flight because he didn't want to crash it on his first go, you know. So.
Yeah, I'm not with an audience.
Yeah.
So that's let's explore that for a little bit. So I imagine you're sitting in that plane on the runway and you've got it fired up. What's running through your mind? What was running through your mind that first time you took it out?
That's an interesting question because I wanted to address that. I sat on the end of the runway and I prayed.
I bet.
It wasn't a prayer. It wasn't a prayer that God would keep me safe.
Okay.
It was a prayer of, Lord, I belong to you.
Right.
This airplane belongs to you. And if there is anything that makes this airplane work, it's your gift. Any of my ideas this is all yours. Right. And take it, make it of it whatever you will. And then I pushed up the throttle, and that was it.
And you took off and you landed, and So as you were flying it, were you thinking, man, this is exactly what I was thinking it would do, or were you surprised a little bit at certain things?
A little bit surprised.
Okay.
It was better than the sum of its parts.
Nice. That's great.
Beautiful.
That's nice to be surprised in that way and not the other way.
Yeah. It was, and again, it goes back to that. To my prayer, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I found this to be true, is that God blesses us in ways that are so far beyond our own abilities. I guess maybe I was bound by my own ideas of how God works with his people, that he helps us to be the best that we can. No, sometimes that he gives us gifts that are far beyond.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so you have this nice surprise, and so you land and you think, man, this is better than I even imagined it was going to be. That's great. Yeah. That's great. So what happens then? I mean, you've got to win an aircraft, and you've poured yourself into it for years, and now you have it. What do you do next?
Well, I built this thing for myself. Because,
this is a good point to make. Sometimes people, they're thinking about the sale when they should be thinking about what they really love, and then focus on that. And then if it's really great, then it sells itself almost.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to compete. There had been some time in my life that that I hadn't been able to be involved in active competition. But as Laura was growing up, by this time she was out of high school, and she had just graduated from nursing. So she didn't need Dad around so much anymore. And so I thought, okay, I'm going for the U.S. aerobatic team.
Oh, wow.
And so that was my thought. So there was a young man who had become a very close friend, and he still lives in the Portland area, and he was a competitor, very highly regarded and respected in that competition arena. And so I asked him to fly it. I said, fly this thing and see if you. See what you think about it. He flew it and came back and he said, can I build one? And ultimately he did. His was the first one after my original prototype. But after that, it was just, I took it down to an air show in Florida that first year called Sun and Fun. And nobody knew anything about it. It was one of those airplanes that just showed up. It got a nice reception, and there were a number of people who started saying, "Hey, I'd really like to have one of these." And I kept telling them, I don't have a company to produce them. This was I built this for me.
Right.
And but my friend back in Portland, Greg, he really wanted one, and there was another guy there in Portland, an attorney, who wanted one. He was also involved in the sport, and so I said, "Well, I'll help you guys. I can't. I'm not in the business of building airplanes, but I'll help you build one." And so that's kind of how it started, Chris. Is that we, Chris and Chris, we just people were wanting them, and after they flew it, they said, why don't you offer this as a kit? So that's what we did.
So that's the company that eventually you are running, is a company that makes kind of kits that people can build themselves.
Yes.
This is kind of fun. This is like the IKEA of performance aircraft.
This is
you just get like a little tool, and you just put in your little.
There you go. You are exactly right. Exactly right. This was few airplanes. This was a very, very specialized single place airplane, and it was designed for one thing, and it was designed for air show and competition aerobatics. It was a fun sport plane because of its like a good sports car is a good sports car, whether it's a race car or not.
Right.
But an airline pilot from Seattle area kept bugging me. He wanted one, but he wanted 2 seats. So I said, well, in my spare time, as I've been tinkering around, I do have a design for a 2-place airplane. And so he said he would take the first one if I'd build it. So we built a 2-place version of the airplane. It's called the 202, the G202. And that ultimately turned out to be the most successful in numbers. We by that time we really started kind of forming a company to produce these kits. I was able to get two extremely competent young men. Both of them had worked at High Tech building the parts for my prototype, but both of them wanted out of Southern California. And when I suggested maybe they come up and help me put together an oven to build our own parts, they came up and did that for me. So we formed a company called Composites Unlimited, and that company still operates out of St. Helens, Oregon, building primarily composite parts for the aerospace industry and some non-aerospace stuff that's real high tech. But anyway, that was part of this company being formed in the mid to later 90s, and we kitted the parts and developed a manual, construction manual, and all total, we sold about almost 100 airplanes.
Okay.
And of that, by far the largest number was the two-place.
Now, with the two-place, was it because somebody wanted to take his girlfriend up?
Oh yes, exactly, exactly.
Makes sense to me.
They want to take somebody with them. Think it's the wife or the kids or the girlfriend or whatever. Sure. A two-place airplane is just so much more popular. Now, it didn't have the raw performance of
Sure.
the single place. However, and I'll just brag a little bit. At the two place at that time, even with two people on board, would outperform anything else that was currently available, even as a single place.
That's cool.
What kind of performance, like speed and range? What kind of speed and range are we talking about?
Well, when we're talking about this type of an airplane, this type of a sport airplane, speed and range are relative because you want your airplane to perform at its peak agility and maneuverability, and that happens at around 180 knots.
Okay.
And if you get faster than that, then you lose efficiency, and if you're slower than that, you're wasting it. So the airplane was really designed around 180 to 185 knots. That's what I designed it, and I would cruise a little faster than that. It would cruise about 200 knots. And range is just a function of how much fuel you want to put in it.
Sure.
And we had a range of around 1,000 miles. So
wow.
I could go to Southern California, without stopping. So I could take off out of Portland and make one of the little airports in LA Basin without having to stop for fuel. I could go to Oshkosh, which is the big mother of all air shows. I could do that on one stop. That give you, but at the same time, when we're flying competition aerobatics, we are doing it with the wing tanks completely empty.
Okay.
So this is when we're talking about acrobatics. We're talking about the kinds of things you see at an air show. I mean,
Yes.
loop-to-loops and spins and just all kinds of stuff that most people would not want to be in a plane to do. I want my plane to be very level and
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's fun. So the company develops. Eventually, you sell it, apparently, because you said it still exists today. But I know you're not working there.
Right. We spun off the composite side of it. The other part of it, or when I say spun it off, the other two gentlemen wound up owning it. I sold them my shares, and the Acrotech was the company that produced the kits and produced the all the parts, supported all the parts. We entered into an agreement with a French company called Cap Aviation. They were kind of the leaders in European theater and dominated really the aerobatic competition market at that time. And as I came on the market with my airplane, he was the current world aerobatic champion, a guy named Dominique Roland, came over and flew the airplane, absolutely loved it, and persuaded CAP Aviation to go into a joint venture with me to certify the airplane, because that would really expand its market and its marketability. And that was both an incredible blessing, also ultimately turned out to be not so good.
Okay, well, this is
we
something,
we were in the final stages of certification. We're coming right down to the end. We'd already done all the really cool stuff, like swinging the airplane in a huge big hangar against a brick wall, and taking the wing and loading it up until they never were able to break it. But we loaded the wing up, to get all those stress tests done and everything. And then I became concerned because CAP Aviation owed me a sizable amount of money for all of the materials and the basically we called them ship sets, but the kits that we had supplied for the certification. And right in the middle of this project, they went bankrupt on me.
Oh no! Wow.
Really quick. We shut down Acrotech, and it was clear that just as this company had been God's gift, it was time to get out. And fortunately, God was very generous with me. We never did have to face bankruptcy. We never had to go that route. There was. I had some ideas about continuing it on, but it was kind of one of those things of been there, done that.
Yeah,
I've got
sure.
some other things that are good interests.
Right.
And so, we paid off our bills, and I went back to flying for a while. But so that's kind of how that whole thing wound down. Now, it didn't wind down, though. That's the problem, is that I still get calls almost constantly from people who either want one or have one and need some assistance. In fact, I got a text on the flight out here this morning with about a dozen pictures from one of my builders in Italy. So, I mean, we're still involved in doing this thing.
That's cool.
But this is a kind of a fun, not a fun one, but an important, I think, note to include in the story, and that is, so often when we hear these stories, we just hear about the happy ending, and everybody kind of just disappears. Yeah. So you get this bit of bad news. Did you have any inkling that the company that you were working with was in that kind of financial difficulty?
No, absolutely none. Absolutely none. I was making regular trips to France for meetings with the DGAC. My engineer who worked for me was going back and forth with me. We were doing all of the testing. The owner of CAP Aviation was a very highly respected aerospace guy in Europe. And what we didn't know was that there were some constraints on his finances that maybe even no one other than himself and his family knew about. And all of that came out, and he was unable to continue with what he had been trying to do.
Wow.
So thought a lot about trying to buy the certification testing program, but it was by that time that was in the millions of dollars, and it just wasn't something that was. And then the other thing that we learned is that unless I was a French citizen, it would be very difficult to do that. And we had our agreement was an agreement of reciprocity where we would get certification in the United States. So we were marching along together with French certification and U.S. certification, and I really couldn't separate them.
Yeah, right.
So it was time to just do something different.
Yeah. Well, that happens. That happens in life.
Well,
anyway,
not to be. What happened after that? What opportunity was different after that? I know we're running out of time, but I got more questions, Wiley.
Go for it.
I went to work for a company in Portland, but doing what I knew how to do, which is fly airplanes. And I continued to support Acrotech and the customer base that we had there. Really, the only thing that changed is that we weren't actively pursuing certification and we weren't actively producing kits. So I went back to flying full time, and that was a very fortuitous thing. It worked out really well, and so. Along about that time, we had 9/11, and then we had the dot-com bubble burst, which was a big part of my market. So as Chris knows, I kind of moved into another entrepreneurial venture, which was managing airplanes and providing crew services and things like that for people who owned airplanes. We're talking about large corporate jets or personal jet aircraft, but they weren't big enough to, or they didn't have a company with the resources to need their own flight department. So as you talk about a real high net worth individual, he wants an airplane, but he's just one guy. And so I would contract with him to manage his airplane. I'd take care of his airplane. I'd be his flight department.
Sure. So he does. So he's not hiring a pilot. He's not.
Right.
He's not working with FBOs. He doesn't have to learn about maintenance on the plane, which apparently there's a lot of maintenance on these planes. Apparently there's a lot of maintenance.
Yeah. So I offered a turnkey, turnkey solution, and some of the people that we did this service for names that all of you would recognize. There's celebrities and also high net worth individuals in the Portland area and in other areas. And they had an airplane, and so we would take care of it for them. And I did that up until I decided to retire about 5 years ago. And so I sold that business. And thought I'd retired until another friend of mine from church approached me and says, "Hey, I need an airplane." So there I am.
Yeah, so
I can't quit.
Yeah, it keeps chasing you around, but that's because you know how to do some things that not many people know how to do, Richard. And I think that's another important thing to note if you're going to be an entrepreneur or trying to get things off the ground with a business. It's great to have some skills that are in demand and a knowledge base that people are willing to pay you for, and that's great. So in the process here, so again, let me just kind of revisit this sort of intuitive approach to things. So you're there, you need to kind of get to the next place in your life, and what do you do to identify this opportunity? I mean, was it just intuitive? I mean, it just makes sense, or was it a more calculated process? You were like thinking, I got to start a business, and you're just looking around, and things come together for you. Do you know what I'm getting at?
I do, completely. And unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you because how this last company called Northwest Aircraft Management, it's the way it happened was that some guys that I knew and some guys that, like I said, when I kind of really scaled back Acrotech, I went to work for a company flying their airplane. Well, this guy had a lot of friends. He had a lot of friends that were high net worth individuals. They, well, I've got an airplane. In fact, that was kind of the first step was in doing management. Was he had a very close friend and actually an investor in his company who owned his own airplane, and he needed somebody to take care of it for him. And so the guy I was working for at the time said, well, call Richard. He takes care of my airplane and see if he'd do yours too. So I had a full-time job, and I started just it's kind of a side gig
Yeah.
of taking care of additional airplanes. Well, he had a friend that had an airplane. Then I met a guy at well, didn't meet him. I'd already known him for years. A guy that had was in the senior housing business. And he asked me if I would help him buy, and he needed a bigger and a larger airplane with more range and more speed. And so he asked me if I'd help him with that. And I said, sure. So I think the way it happens, Chris, is I don't know how to say no.
Well, I do see a trend too, and I don't know if Wiley was picking up on this, but you called it side gigs, and I would call them hustles. You're always grinding away at a hustle. And whether it was in the beginning of just, doing the labor, you're always hustling, you're always busy, you're always participating. And I think that, I think that could be one of the key factors of being presented with opportunities is you're always hustling, you're always participating in the efforts. And so, that just from your story, you didn't stop ever engaging or participating, and the way you were doing it was through a hustle. Like, it wasn't a conventional job, it wasn't a business, and that's where I put it in kind of the hustle category. You're like, I'm doing these things for these guys because I know how to do it, and they need it done, and they know that I know. I'm a guy that
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that in my life, in my experience, there's really two different types of entrepreneurship. One is providing yourself a job, and the second is building a business. And one can become the other. My business became sort of the part-time job with Aquatech, but I've also taken it the other way, where I've taken what was, and sometimes I've started a business which was to provide myself with an income because I needed that. I was changing jobs or something was going on that I needed either extra money or whatever. So I think it's important to remember that you don't have to have this big, grand plan to start a business.
Yeah. I think that's really a great thing to note. I get asked the question a lot because when I'm out and about and speaking at different events and I talk about people I know who started businesses or the need to have productive property if you can get it and that kind of thing, it always comes down to how do I start? And and what I say to people is there are things that I have no access to, I have no clue about. That's where you need to be, focused, is identifying the opportunities in spheres that you know something about. And when it comes to aviation, if there would be no way I would ever have a way to get started in aviation. Whereas with your story, Richard, you've got all of these different periods in your life where you are doing different things, related to aviation from the time you're a kid, with your first summer job, that kind of thing. And then the next thing you know, hobnobbing with celebrities and helping them take care of their planes and stuff, So it's just fun. And like Chris noted, it's kind of a thing that you just always had going on. It wasn't like you woke up one day and said, "Oh, I need to start a business." You kind of had a lot of things going on, and it sounds like it was a lot of fun over the years for you. It wasn't like,
yeah.
I think that's it.
Rule number one, you got to have fun.
Absolutely, you got to have fun. And the other thing about it is that if you're out of work or if you're underemployed, then do something about it.
Right. It takes some initiative. I think that's what a lot of guys need to be encouraged to do these days. I think back when you were young, and you're not all that much older than me. I can remember those days. There wasn't a whole lot of emphasis on entrepreneurship, but there's a lot now. And in those days, you had more entrepreneurs, even though people weren't talking about it.
Exactly.
And today you have fewer entrepreneurs, and everybody's talking about it. I think the thing that's different is that there was a time, at that time, there was just, I think, a greater sense of I can just go out and do stuff. I don't need anybody's permission. I can just go do stuff. Yeah. And I don't think anybody thought about it. I just think they just did stuff. Anyway.
Exactly. And I think you're right, Chris. There's a lot of talk right now about entrepreneurship, and that's not bad. But I think it's important to say, particularly on a podcast that has the reach that yours does, is that entrepreneurship is not for everyone.
Yep, that's true. That's true.
Very
And
true.
there are some guys that are cut out to be employees.
Yep.
And there is nothing wrong with being an employee and doing the best you can for somebody else. You know, I work for a company right now that has some wonderful employees.
Yep.
And yeah, the guy that started it, he's an entrepreneur. There are other guys, but he couldn't have the business that we have now without people who their calling in life is to be an employee. So
100%.
don't get swept away by this thing. And I think a lot of young guys think they have to be entrepreneurs.
Well, that's a good note to end on. And thanks for your time, Richard. This has been a lot of fun.
Hey, I
to talk
enjoyed
to you.
it.
I hope I get to sit down with you more. I got lots of questions about, I got more questions about how you manage and operate planes, or aircraft. So I got many questions more. So hopefully I get to bump into you sometime. And
Hey, I'd love that. And also, I'd
let's-
love to talk to you more about this whole span of my life when I was doing turnaround consulting. That was really
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Fun. Well, maybe we can have you back on and talk about some of this stuff. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening to this episode of the Chris and Chris Talk Business Show. And if you have an interest in learning a little more about things that Richard is doing today, we'll put some stuff in the show notes about Richard and the things he's up to. Maybe some links about, that connected to the businesses that he once had, or maybe some photographs of Richard flying planes, that kind of stuff. But we're really grateful for your interest in the show, and we encourage you to share it with some folks. We're still building our audience, and we're excited about getting the word out. The other podcast I do has got a very different kind of audience from this one, so there isn't a whole lot of carryover. But this is one that I enjoyed a whole lot. Anyway, do you have anything you want to say, Chris, as we wrap up?
No, I love the conversations, and they keep me up thinking, you're giving me about 10 hours of thought that I got to think about for the next couple nights while I'm trying to go to sleep. So thank you for that, because I live for this. I really do. So thank you, Richard.
And if you're watching us on YouTube and you're wondering about the shirts that Chris and I are wearing, these shirts are produced by William Murray, the Bill Murray of, movie fame and so forth. But anyway, the other Chris has a connection to that company, and so he sent me some shirts, and so I really like them. And anyway, free ad for William Murray.
Yeah, WilliamMurray.com. Go buy some shirts.
Anyway, thanks a lot, Richard, again.